One of my favorite television series is MASH. With its incredible mix of comedy and drama, its depiction of wartime, and its great set of characters, there's something immediately special about it. I did a previous video going over the history of MASH and why I'm such a fan, but I felt inspired to count down my favorite episodes. And to be honest, there are so many gems it was difficult to narrow it down to 10, and ranking them proved even more difficult. So rather than a standard countdown, I'm instead going to reveal my 10 favorites in order of air date. I also decided not to include Goodbye, Farewell, and Amen. It's probably my favorite series finale of all time, but I did not think it fair to judge a 2-hour special against regular 25-minute episodes. So let's begin with my favorite episode from Season 1, Tuttle. The premise is relatively simple. Hawkeye makes up a fake captain in order to get some much-needed supplies, and things eventually spiral into the entire camp being in awe of this man, who does not exist. Seeing the MASH unit, especially Margaret Houlihan and Frank Burns, wanting desperately to impress Tuttle is hilarious. There's some great interplay between Henry Blake and Radar as expected, and I won't dare spoil the way this episode ends. That the end credits actually give Tuttle a credit only adds to the winning humor of the episode. In terms of MASH's pure comedic episodes, Tuttle definitely has one of the best laugh ratios. Officer of the Day. Throughout the series, Hawkeye tends to mock authority, so it makes for an interesting change of pace when he finds himself Officer of the Day and trying to handle control of the MASH unit. We get some funny antics from Klinger, and Frank being his usual bossy self as he takes command in place of an absent Henry Blake. This episode might contain Flag's funniest appearance as he tries to take in a Korean POW, and Hawkeye attempts to stop him. What really pushes this episode into the top 10 for me is the hilarious monologue from Hawkeye when ordered to carry a gun. It's one of the best lines in MASH, and one of many reasons this episode stands as one of the funniest. Abyssinia Henry. This episode marked a turning point for MASH, as it showed the series would become more of a mix of comedy and drama in later seasons. Watching it the first time, it's a sweet and touching farewell for Henry Blake. We really get a sense of the respect everyone, especially Radar, had for him, and there's a happiness at seeing him finally get to go home and see his family. The funny moments work, but it's the heartfelt goodbyes that elevate it, especially with how genuine they feel. However, when we reach the final scene and Radar makes that famous announcement, it's a complete gut punch and serves as one of the most emotional and heartbreaking scenes in television history. On repeat viewings, Abyssinia Henry feels a lot sadder, as we know his fate and it becomes difficult to watch the episode with a dry eye. It's super effective and works, and while Larry Gelbart later regretted doing what he did, I think it shows the message of the show, that nobody is safe in war, even our loved ones. The Late Captain Pierce. This episode is a great representation of the tug-of-war that is Hawkeye, with both his sense of responsibility tugging at his more carefree side. When the army thinks he's dead, he treats it as a golden opportunity to have some fun, and the unit makes the most of his mistake. However, when he realized the problems with this era, with his duty as a medical professional and his father's worry coming into focus, it makes an impact. Alan Alda portrays Hawkeye's shifting attitudes perfectly, and the perfect reaction comes when BJ gives him a pep talk on a bus set to leave the MASH. What Hawkeye says is sad in its truth, and definitely makes one emotional. It's a wonderfully written script, with a major learning experience for Hawkeye, and key to his character development. Soldier of the Month. This is another episode played primarily for laughs, where the jokes work tremendously. The biggest ones come courtesy of Klinger's desperate attempts to win the Soldier of the Month contest, and cheat his way through a general knowledge quiz. There's some great comic moments when Frank contracts a fever and is delirious through a lot of the show. It's a great showcase for the offbeat romance between him and Margaret, and Loretta Swit's facial reactions are perfect when she coerces Father Morquet to take down his will. It's a simple show with a basic premise, but the writers managed to get some great bits out of it, and also gives an opportunity for some of the background enlisted men to get more chances to shine. Bug Out. Despite being a mobile army surgical hospital, we never really see much of the MASH being, well, mobile. This episode gives an idea of how MASH units would change the locations depending on where the fighting was taking place, and the writers think of some funny scenarios. Frank gets his usual comeuppance in many scenes as he orders everyone about, and his answer to being asked what the oldest profession in the world is hilarious. Klinger has a nice bit of character development as he has to make a tough decision, and the dramatic B-plot is woven in nicely as it shows not everything about a bug-out was easy. It's a strong look at some of the less explored parts of MASH life on the show, and a great idea for a two-parter. The nurses. Aside from Margaret, Nurse Kelly, and early on Lieutenant Dish, the nurses were mostly in the background, or an actress would have a speaking role in one episode only to disappear. In this episode, they finally get the chance to lead a story, and it's quite refreshing. It allows us to get to know the nurses working on the MASH unit, and allow them to grow as characters, even if we never see some of them again. It also represents a transitional period for Margaret, as she goes from a strict commander to somebody who wants to be friends with her nurses. The scene where she talks about how she's treated by them is one of the saddest scenes in the series, and Swick performs it marvelously. Hawkeye gets some zingers too, but this episode belongs to the nurses. Inga. Working on this list, I notice I seem to have a certain preference for episodes where Hawkeye is tested. This is yet another example of this, as Hawkeye, who sees himself as somebody who respects women, finds himself unsure of that. The discussions he has with Margaret as he reacts to a visiting doctor's medical prowess are well handled, and it's a scenario where Alan Alda, who wrote the episode, doesn't portray Hawkeye as in the right. The romance that develops between him and Inga is one that does not go smoothly, and that works in developing them. After this episode, we really did see it change Hawkeye, and what a wonderful story to do it with. Morale victory. The storyline with Hawkeye and BJ trying to raise morale in the camp is a great one, but what really pushes the episode into becoming something special is Winchester's plot. As funny as Frank Burns was, he was a fairly one-dimensional character who did not grow much during his time on MASH. Charles Winchester was an excellent replacement. While a snob prone to egotism, he had another side to him that came out on occasion and showed he had a thoughtful side. When he finds himself dealing with a patient upset that his musical career is over, we see a Winchester struggling with how to solve this dilemma. It's touching seeing him figure out the problem, even going to follow Mulcahy for advice. When he finally figures out how to help his patient, it's touching, and shows the power of music and Winchester's kind heart. It's a lovely story and beautifully told. And the final favorite of these 10 episodes is As Time Goes By, which was the final half-hour episode of the series. However, because Goodbye, Farewell, and Amen was filmed before the rest of Season 11, this episode was the last one filmed. The hijinks involving a fake hand grenade are really funny, as are the scenes where Hawkeye and the rest of the MASH try to include their stuff in the time capsule, much to Margaret's annoyance. However, that final scene is one I keep coming back to. The callbacks to previous characters long gone are a nice reminder that MASH respected its characters, and never forgot them even as they departed the series. And the actors knowing this is the last time many of them would be playing these characters adds another degree of emotion to these final scenes. It's one of the highlights of the later seasons, but the entire episode succeeds in lifting one's spirits. So those are my favorite episodes of MASH. I tried to include a mix of mostly comedic episodes and heavily dramatic ones, and give an idea of why these episodes are so special to me. See you next time.